good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for carving out some time to spend with the Aliro team here on our webinar, Expanding Your Talent Pool. My name is Bob Archibald. I'm the CEO of Aliro. I'm going to make some quick introductions here to the participants from the Aliro team that are joining us today. We have Jonathan Furman Robbins, who will be driving our presentation. Jonathan is a program manager in our solution architecture team, as well as part of the customer success team. We have Matthew Siegel, who's our Senior VP of Sales and Partnerships, Madeline Jane, who is our Senior Marketing Lead, and Greg Walters, who is our Director of Customer Success. Thom is a panelist along with me today. Thom, would you like to take a moment and introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're dialing in from. I'm really honored to be here with Arch. I'm the board chair for Aliro and excited to talk about some of the things that we're going to do today. So Arch, let's take it away.
All right. So first of all, thank you guys all again for attending today. In advance of the call today, we actually had shared some questions that we asked you all to respond to. And we're going to share with you on the screen what some of those questions are in a minute. The agenda for the call today, just to kind of outline what we're going to run through, is we're going to talk a little bit about old ways versus new ways, and hopefully share some knowledge with you that you will find valuable. We're going to talk about candidate discovery and rediscovery, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A at the end. While we do have a presentation to run through with everybody today, we'd love for this to be conversational. So if you have some questions that come up along the way, please don't hesitate to come forward with them, and we'll hit pause and do our best to answer your questions. So Jonathan, moving on to our respondents, what our peers are saying out there. If you could drive, please. So this was interesting and not necessarily surprising. What we heard from you folks in terms of feedback is really, what are the peers saying about the recruiting challenges that exist out there today? It's been an extraordinary time for sure this past year, but what I noticed in here was that the challenges really haven't changed a lot. Some of the bigger things are attracting the right candidates, candidate quality. It's still one of the most important challenges that everybody faces. Long hiring processes. Well, I'm not sure what we can do about that, but that's still a challenge. And recruiting diversity candidates, obviously that's become a big part of the narrative these days too. But we found this interesting and not necessarily surprising. Moving forward to the next slide, we also asked you folks what you were doing out there, what kind of tools you're using, and where you're sharing opportunities. And again, this wasn't necessarily surprising either. We see that a lot of you folks, when a new position comes open, it's pretty much what's been happening for the last 31 years that I've been in recruiting. You're leveraging job boards, LinkedIn, Snag a Job, Career Builder, Indeed. Indeed and LinkedIn, along with Facebook groups, seem to be the largest way of doing it. And that's really a great segue into the next slide, which is, it's been a pretty static unidirectional way. I have been involved in recruiting for over 30 years. That makes me an old guy. When I started recruiting, we were using phone books in the Harris directory, and then this amazing machine called a fax machine came along. What really hasn't changed a whole lot, even with the adoption of technology and HR tech, is it's largely been a static unidirectional approach. You have a job come open, your sourcing teams or your recruiting teams are basically starting anew every time. They're looking for a job seeker with specific skill sets in the market, in their geography, willing to work for the pay. You might find them on a job board or a company career site. You try to get them to apply through an ATS, and it's really a one-directional process. It ends there. Either the person is hired or not. And we're going to talk a little bit more fully about maybe a different way to think about that makes it more multi-directional than unidirectional as we go forward here. Before we get into that, we're going to talk a little bit about what candidate discovery and discovery is and why it matters, reasons why it's becoming the next big thing. And for that, Thom, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Well, this is one of the most interesting parts of the webinar from my perspective, Arch. When we think about candidates and where candidates are, we often do think about that unidirectional way. What are those job boards that I can go to? What are those locations that I can post opportunities for and try to grab attention? And part of doing that is your employer brand, the messaging you have out on the marketplace, and the types of jobs that you have available. But there's another side to this, which is about the rediscovery. We spend a lot of time getting information about potential candidates, learning about those candidates, understanding where they may fit inside of our ecosystem. And while a lot of ATSs have a rudimentary form of being able to search internally, it's only recently that we're really starting to open up the door to what we can do with the data that we already have. So if we think about reason number one, some of the biggest mistakes we make for any of us, whether we're hiring managers or recruiters or TA teams, is we don't necessarily always think to look at the candidates inside of our own world, whether that's a database in your HR system, whether that's an ATS. You know, a recent Career Builder survey talked about how one of the biggest complaints employers have is the failure to look at candidates internally to what we already know about people. It doesn't necessarily mean our hires that we already have, our employees, but what about all those candidates that we've contacted over the years? We have all these discussions internally in HR about the people that are maybe not right for this position today, or the silver medalist, or someone that just reached out of the blue and said, "Hey, I love your company, love what you're doing, would like to find a chance to work for you in the future." So when we think about the ATS, the limitations of what the ATSs have, the Boolean searches, looking through those resume databases, they're not necessarily the easiest way to find those candidates. So with reason number two, you know, 95% of recruiters saying the job market is going to remain or get more competitive. That makes candidate rediscovery even more important. If a candidate already knows you or already knows your company through a previous engagement, especially if that previous engagement was positive, here's a great opportunity in a competitive candidate-driven market to really find that talent a lot faster. They're going to respond more to you because they already know who you are. They've had a positive engagement. And this also helps with some of the capital efficiency discussions we have all the time. How do we find those candidates more quickly, those best candidates that we want to engage and bring into our employee base to move the needle for our business? So with reason number three, 65% of resumes received for high volume roles are completely ignored. That's a really big number. I certainly know that from my perspective. I remember when I was CEO of Smashfly having a conversation with Tesla, and the head of TA for Tesla telling me for every job that they posted, they received over 10,000 resumes. That's massively high volume. So if you think about the difficulty of average everyday companies just trying to get through their day-to-day business, it ties into a JobVite survey from 2016 that talks about how recruiters are just receiving so many more applicants, so much more volume for each of the positions that they're trying to hire. So for the time constrained recruiter, the better tools and systems that you have in place, especially with rediscovery, the easier it's going to be to meet those goals. Now, reason number four, 6 seconds on average scanning a resume. We're expecting humans to look through a high volume of data, words on a page, and making a very quick assessment on whether or not this is a good candidate. As we think about candidate rediscovery, we're creating a scenario where that person's already been vetted to a certain extent. Now, maybe you're looking at this a second time, that particular candidate may now have 12 seconds. 6 seconds from their first engagement, and now another 6 that creates the ability to move more quickly on those resumes that you already have. And then those resumes are not just the ATS black hole, they're ATS black gold. They're an opportunity for us to look inside of the data that we already have with candidate rediscovery. So we're not spending as much time manually screening those resumes. And then finally, for reason number 5, passive candidates. Only 36% of candidates are active. How do we get after that talent? How do we get after those folks that may or may not respond to an outbound email or an outbound social media campaign? Those folks that are just thinking about, I'm happy where I am. I don't really have any reason to leave. This is where that talent rediscovery and that referral network really can empower the TA teams, moving things forward so that you're getting those results a lot faster. And those results that you are getting faster are higher quality results. So let's ask the question, what is talent rediscovery? How does this all work anyway? Well, if we think about discovery as outreach, talent sends in a resume, sends in an email, that's your first contact point. Well, rediscovery is really going in and looking at the candidates who've previously applied, maybe even been previously screened, gotten through a part of the application process, but they're in your applicant tracking system. They're in the ATS, and they may be open to something in the future because they did reach out at one point. Now, LinkedIn says in their study, the ultimate list of hiring statistics, that 70% of the global workforce is made up of passive talent who weren't actively looking for jobs. That's only 30% of really the active job seekers. So as we think about candidate rediscovery and how Ideal plots it out as the next big thing, we know that we need to be looking internally at our candidates, both as hiring managers and as talent acquisition teams. We know the landscape is going to get more competitive. We know that we're getting high volumes of resumes. We know we don't have a lot of time to spend on those resumes, and many of those candidates aren't active. So let's get after this with technology enabling the TA team. Leveraging artificial intelligence with technologies like machine learning, neural network processing, these are opportunities for us to really get into some of the nuts and bolts of what we have inside of our own data system. It allows us to really rediscover, like Recruiting Daily says, the prior applications within your ATS that already meet the qualifications for roles they've applied. You know, using artificial intelligence to mine that ATS data and find those resumes really gets those quality hires a lot faster into your pipeline. So as we think about searching for talent, and as you think about your next steps, optimize the talent you already have. Optimize the opportunities with the data that you've got and find those hidden gems inside of your ATS system. Those folks that have previously applied may be the perfect match for you. So why not go after them? Why not leverage what you've got to help you get access to this great pool of data? So Arch, as we think about this with leveraging AI and technology, and we talked about these 5 reasons, we added a lot of data for the folks on the call. What's the real value proposition when we think about the candidate rediscovery?
That's a great question, and thanks for that, Thom. So as we think about candidate discovery or rediscovery, really we want to take and turn what's been the fundamental thinking for the past 30 years of my experience in staffing and recruiting and turn it on its ear. We want to take what's been a static unidirectional process and change it to a dynamic multi-directional one. And if you can leverage that with the value prop of referrals, we think there's really something there. And we've got a lot of data behind this now to be able to make that statement. You know, if you think about what we've done in the past, targeting an active job seeker, that person probably represents a network, and that person's network, other networks. You've already paid to acquire this talent. What are you doing to tap into or facilitate engagement with that person's network and their network's networks? And Thom's going to talk a little bit more fully about that in a moment, but let me explain the referrals value prop. I think everybody that we've engaged with here at Aliro on the brand side of the business recognizes that referrals are a great source of hires. I'm not sure that everybody knows some of the stats relative to that, and that's what's represented on the screen here today. They're typically faster to hire, 6 times faster to hire. They've got greater retention rates. They're typically the top 93% of performers. They're more likely to respond, more likely to accept an offer. Why aren't we doing more with the recruiter value or the referrals value prop, if you will? Jonathan, next up. This slide to me was probably one of the most impactful slides. We actually use this in our presentations here at Aliro because I think it really drives home the point. What's represented here is sources of candidate flow. Most of the candidates today at most of the brands that we've engaged with attract via job boards and career sites, and that represents almost 75% of the inbound candidate flow that comes in. Yet that's only yielding about 36% of the hires, less for job boards, more for career sites. When you look at that as applied to referrals, it's typically 7% or less that we see inbound candidate flow coming from referrals. Yet 40% of those folks are getting hired. So whatever we can do that takes candidate discovery and rediscovery and marries that to the referrals value prop, I think it's going to become even more powerful. And that's really the message we wanted to communicate today. There's a better way to maximize your recruiting process when you start to think about it as active and multifunctional. Think about what you've already paid to acquire from a talent pool perspective. You've got, to Tom's point, we can tap into your existing ATS. That's a gold mine of data. If you think about the silver and the bronze medalists, these are good candidates. They may not have been hired for the job at the time for whatever the reason, but they're still there and they're available to be mined. Not only they available to be mined, but if you think about them from a referrals perspective, if they've had a good experience engaging with your brand, why wouldn't you want to ask them for referrals? And that's really how this begins to get powerful. Tying this back to your ATS, if you're not leveraging ATI, I think a lot of what we've seen in the marketplace has been really manual systems where people are creating folders in their ATS to segment out their gold and silver and bronze candidates. Maybe they put a rating system broken down by functional area in place. That's another way that we've seen folks try to organize and leverage the data that's already existing within their ATS. Building specific statuses for candidates within your ATS, that's another great way to do it. You can have not hired great candidate, not hired great candidate for a functional area. But my point is there's a lot of different ways that you can segment out this data if you're not leveraging technology. And of course, technology, as it's matured today, is a great solution to be able to consider when looking at your ATS. But let's not just talk about your ATS. There are other untapped resources that are out there. Most of you have them in place today. I'm sure a number of you have ERGs, employee resource groups, and they might be for diversity communities, military communities, and the list goes on and on. What are you doing to leverage those folks? These are people that obviously work at your brand, know what it takes to be successful at your brand, and every one of them represents a network that you could be tapping into. If you've incentivized these folks to engage their networks, ask them for referrals, ask them for specific referrals, whether it's military, diversity, or some combination thereof. It can be a really powerful way to broaden the talent pool that's already available to you. If you think about past candidates, we've talked a lot about that. But again, think about these folks not just as a candidate source, but as a network source, a referral source. They all have networks. And if you've walked somebody through an experience with your brand, they're familiar with it, and they had a good experience, 9 out of 10 folks, if incentivized, will likely engage their networks to at least think about who they might know. It's just another source of untapped talent that's out there. And again, bringing this back to what Thom had shared with us about the number of folks that are on the market that are passive, 70% of the market that's out there isn't looking for a job. They're not looking at job postings. They're not coming to career sites. Most of those folks, like everybody on our team here at Aliro, were referrals. They came to us because somebody knew we had an opportunity with a specific skill set and they made a referral. That's still the best way that we know how today to reach out to the passive job seeker market. And there's some ways that we'll talk about how to do that more effectively as well, because it's really an important part. But before we go there, Thom, perhaps you could take a little bit of time and talk about the talent pools and the talent networks and just how powerful they can become, just so that the participants on the call can really understand and comprehend the gold mine of talent that they're sitting on.
One of the things that's really exciting about how we look at talent pools and talent networks is if you visualize the impact, it's much easier to see the value proposition. So the talent pools and talent networks are not just what's in our ATS. It's not just what's in our own little world. And it's not just the folks that we can connect with through LinkedIn, through Indeed, through other platforms. Because really behind every job seeker who's out there today, they have their own personal and professional networks. And then those networks have networks. And as you look at how this grows over time, being able to leverage that network effect of the various internal and external talent pools is a massive gold mine of opportunity. You know, thinking about how you can really get access to just a huge variety of folks helps in a couple of ways. One is it really opens the door to thinking about diversity, equality, and inclusion. Those networks of people go beyond community boundaries, go beyond like-minded boundaries. They expand into other areas. We're thinking about diversity, equality, and inclusion. That link that you have to this massive opportunity through the networks is huge when developing some of these talent pools. But I know that there are some keys to success. And Arch, I'm really curious, if we think about these talent pools, we think about rediscovery, we think about all this technology, how do we get successful with all this?
Great question, Thom. We've spent a lot of time thinking about this and really proving this out. And it's not rocket science at the end of the day. Really, there's three keys to success. Identify your user communities, your talent pools, and we've talked about that. You know who they are. Identify them. You all have jobs and opportunities to be able to feed into this. And if you put in the middle this incentive piece, and you're not shy about asking for referrals, and you can leverage outreach and engagement to these folks, that's how this really becomes successful. And it's really all about building, branding, and promoting a successful program like this. If you have these three key ingredients, it can be very successful, and you've seen that happen again and again. It doesn't happen though without communication, and that's the next thing that I really want to speak to. In all the years that I've been recruiting, I'll share with you guys a personal story. One of the things that we did religiously at MedSearch, a company I had previously, when somebody went through an interview process and they weren't hired for the role, we took the time to communicate back to that person, thank them for their engagement, tell them that they weren't chosen for the role, and ask them to please stay in touch with us if they were in fact good candidates. I can't tell you how many times I had an individual thank me just for taking the time to let them know what had happened, because more often than not, they never heard a response from a customer, from a company. And that really kind of speaks to the fact that communications matter. You've got to be transparent, you've got to be responsive, and if you can communicate, you're really contributing to a positive candidate experience. Whether that person's hired or not, you really want to be able to drive home that communication flow forward and back. Candidates should be able to walk away from the process talking about what a great experience it was, again, whether they were hired or not. How do you do that? Well, you can automate that, leveraging technology. You can build automated messaging. If you're talking about high volume roles and you just don't have time to call everybody, at least send an email to that person. As you think about the jobs that you're communicating, do it transparently. Don't just talk about the job description and what somebody needs to do. Clearly communicate the good and the bad about the job. What's the opportunities? What's it really like to do the job? People appreciate transparency, and that's a big part of being successful in terms of communications. And then do your best to keep candidates updated throughout the process. If you're going to ask folks for referrals, and it's okay to do that, especially if you're providing incentives, whether that's internal or external, it's okay to ask for referrals. But make sure that you're communicating clearly with the people that they're sharing with you. If they're going to open up their networks and share quality talent, respond in a timely manner. And if you have to automate that, sure, there's technology solutions out there to be able to help do so, but you've really got to make it clear that you're communicating on a regular basis with these folks. And that's probably the single biggest thing that I've seen over 30 years to help really facilitate a positive candidate engagement. So we're going to talk just for a moment here about Aliro and our platform. We've spent the last 5 years building the Aliro solution, and a lot of the things that we've talked about today are why we architected and built this platform to begin with. It is a smart referral platform that was designed to be able to help brands discover and rediscover talent. We do leverage the power of AI on our platform to do so, and it's taking advantage of the referrals value prop and the crowdsourcing nature of the referrals value prop to be able to really help you guys leverage what you've already paid to acquire. I'm sure there's plenty of you on the call that have spent tens of thousands of dollars acquiring talent. We think we've built a better mousetrap, and we've proven this out in the marketplace. And we're able to go layers deeper than just the referred candidates, but as Thom spoke to today, being able to get into those professional networks. That's really the power of what you all have available if you're able to use a tool to help you do that. Automating outreach and engagement, tracking, managing, those are all parts of what we've done here. And all of this is facilitated with automated communication, dashboards that facilitate that transparency and that communication that we're speaking about. Next up, Jonathan. So a great example of how we've helped to make our customers successful is really represented by what's on the screen here. The numbers that I hope jump out at you are typically when we stand our solution up, we're looking at almost 50% user engagement on the platform. And we've done that fairly simply by leveraging mobile apps, mobile web, optimized web, and enhanced gamification, as well as the transparency of the dashboards. What that has yielded is over 2 million candidates that have been able to be rediscovered and engaged. That in turn has led to cutting costs and hire on average by half, which typically has led to a 4x return or greater on our solution itself. Our goal today was to really provide you guys with some knowledge about thinking about talent pools differently today. But Jonathan, if you go to the last slide, I'm going to just call out a couple of shots before we open examples, before we open this up to Q&A. Weston Foods was a recent addition to our portfolio here. They're one of the largest bakeries in North America. They had a challenge. They had a lot of data in their ATSs, and they had a couple of legacy systems. We did all of this inside of the first 6 weeks. We took a data set from these folks. We were able to re-engage, rediscover 20% of the folks from their latent ATS data. 33% of those folks actually applied for roles, and over 5% of those folks were hired. And we did that inside of 6 weeks. That's really the power. This was all with their data, their network, their jobs, with Aliro underpinning this. And I think that's a great example of success. One other opportunity that we're particularly proud of is what we've done with the folks at G4S. For those of you who don't know G4S, they're the largest security firm on the planet. They employ over 550,000 folks. They have a number of different businesses across the US and a lot of different systems. We've really seamlessly plugged into all the different ATSs and CRMs that they've engaged with to increase their referral hires. They created something on the order of 1,300 referral links in the first 3 months on the platform, and they too were able to engage almost 50% of their population. The other thing that's not represented on here is we've helped them connect to the military community. They hired over 8,000 veterans last year by asking for, targeting, and engaging with the military on a referrals-based solution like this. So I'm going to stop there, because if anybody on the call is interested in learning more about Aliro today, you're welcome to reach out to Matt Siegel and our team here and schedule a call. We'd be happy to do a deeper dive to understand what some of the challenges are that you're facing uniquely and how we might be able to help solve that. But thank you guys for listening. I'd like to open it up at this point to Q&A for any of the questions any of our listeners may have today. Thom, did I miss anything before we do so?
No, you didn't miss anything. It was great.
Okay, great. So, anybody out there?
Thank you, Thom, and thank you, Bob, for that information. We do have some questions here, and I did want to remind our attendees that we do have the last part of our webinar today is going to be a Q&A section. I do have some questions here, but if some come up while Thom and Bob are answering these, please feel free to go ahead and drop those in the Q&A section. The first question we have here is regarding ATS data. I fear that we will be spammed with irrelevant candidates. How do you solve for this?
Thom, you want to take this one, or you want me to swing at it?
So it is a challenge, right? The irrelevant candidates is a big challenge. That's why we're kind of honing in on one of the key themes of this webinar is rediscovering that talent. You know, you can look inside of ATSs with data that you are going to have some resumes that are bot generated, resumes that are, you know, just massively pushed from resume farms. But the reality is that there are ways that we have to look inside of the environments to rediscover that talent that actually are valid candidates. And one of the benefits of using a technology like AI is that it learns over time. And that's really a very, very big part of this. You know, whenever you're thinking about a technology or a new platform or a new tool, and folks say, well, it's got AI. The reality is a lot of systems use the term, but don't really get the benefit of AI. And what's really important, the most important question in my mind to ask is, does it learn? Does it learn over time some of your processes? So if you think about candidate rediscovery, being able to learn over time that the candidates that you have a email conversation with, regardless of where they go through the hiring process, that's a learning opportunity to help you and help your systems understand that there's an opportunity inside of the ATS there. Another side of it is, say you're looking at a particular affinity group or a particular affiliation, like a veterans affiliation. There's ways to learn over time and models that learn over time to be able to help you from a diversity, equality, and inclusion perspective to maybe go after a veterans pool of candidates inside of your own data element. So it's not a panacea. It doesn't solve all the problems of the world, but it absolutely helps augment what the TA teams are doing every day.
Thom, I want to add something to that you just touched on, and I'll use the military community as an example. I'm sure we've got some folks on the call today that are thinking, we don't even know who our military members are that work here. And one of the points that I want to make, and it kind of drives home how AI could really be leveraged to help learn and engage a unique community like that, is the fact that you don't necessarily need to have served in the military to know folks from the military. And one of the folks on our team worked at Verizon. One of the examples that he continually refers to is the fact that 90% of the people that work there that never served all had connectivity to the military community. If you start to leverage thinking like that and resources like that with AI that can learn and get smarter over time, who those resources are to engage, you can really be successful rediscovering talent today with a tool like this that can get smarter over time.
That's great. Thanks, Thom. Thanks, Bob. Got another question here that came in about someone's internal referral program. They have one in place. They state that participation is lacking. Is there a way to solve for this, or is there some norms that are out there now in terms of how to boost employee engagement?
Sure. What we've seen is a lot of the referral programs that exist are employee referral programs. They're employee referral programs only, and it's frequently a link on a job posting. If you know somebody, share this link. That's not necessarily really engaging, and maybe there is a referral bonus that's being offered, but it's not published on the opportunity. This goes back to what we said in the webinar about communication and transparency. One of the best ways that we've seen to facilitate engagement is a number of things that we've done. Broadcast the incentive, put it out there for everybody to see so that people know that it's there. Make it easy for people to refer, and then make it easy for people to see what's happening to the referrals. I can't tell you when we were building this company how many times we did a lot of market research, and we found that one of the biggest failures of a referral program is people make a referral to somebody and they have no idea what happens to it. It goes into a black hole. You're going to do that once or twice and you're not going to do it again. If you've got dashboards that show what's happening to the people you're referring, and the people you're referring are updated on their own dashboards too, it's going to facilitate engagement. One of the other things that we did on the platform is we've automated outreach and engagement leveraging AI. We want to be able to not spam everybody, but send people relevant opportunities based on their functional area and their experience. We found that when you do that in a targeted manner, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, or quarterly, depending on your business, it's a wonderful way to keep people thinking and engaged about your referral platform. The third thing that we've done that I think is really unique is we've gamified the platform to really drive positive behavior on the platform. So we have a point system that underpins all the different activities in our platform, and a brand can choose what they want to incent. Do you want to incent people, for example, downloading the mobile app to be able to make referrals? Looking at referral digests that come through, actually making referrals, having a referral get to an interview stage or a hire. We've gamified that, and we found that that's a great way, because activity begets activity, and it doesn't have to be a monetary reward. We actually have a customer that, believe it or not, they give away parking spots towards the front of the building. They've got a huge parking lot. Nobody likes to walk in the summer or the winter. They incented their folks with our gamified platform. Those that get the most points each month, they get the parking spots. So it can be experiential or anything, but those are three of the most common ways that we've solved for that, and we've seen success.
Thanks for that, Bob. We've got some more questions coming in here. Uh, States, I don't want to add another product in my tech stack. How does a platform like Aliro help me while reducing workload on my recruiters?
Sure. That's one we get quite a bit. Tom, you want to take this? You want me to swing at this one too?
I think you should take this one. It can really talk a lot about some of the value proposition that this platform actually brings.
Yeah. So relative to the way that we've done this, look, when I was a recruiter, I hated having to go in and out of multiple systems, and I don't think anybody today that's on this call will tell you they want to do that. So that meant that we had to solve for that with what we built here at Aliro. Our platform was designed to be implemented seamlessly into whatever the workflow is that you have. And we've got something that we refer to as integration light, where we can pull jobs in from whatever source, data source your jobs reside, and we can send candidates right back into your existing workflow. So once this is set up, and it's very simple and easy to do so, it runs in the background, and it runs in the background seamlessly within the workflows that you've already established. And if it didn't, it just wouldn't be successful. So that's been a large part of what and how we architected the platform to work.
All right, last question we got in here was during the pandemic, we went through mass layoffs. How can we use technology to re-engage with past employees?
Tom, that one might be good for you. I know you're pretty passionate about this.
Yeah, that's a really, really excellent question from my perspective and from personal experience over the years. Not everyone who leaves a company during an event like our pandemic, who are good friends of the company, necessarily look at it as a bad thing to have their old company reach out to them. As a matter of fact, when companies do this well, when employees understand the reasons behind it, it sucks. It absolutely sucks. It's not really a technical term, but it does. And when we think about reaching back out to those candidates to fill jobs that they may have already had, what a great way to build a lot of good rapport and a lot of loyalty. These are people that already know the business. These are people that are already engaged and likely wanting the company to be able to survive. A really good example, real world, that I think a company that's done this really well is a company called Toast, who are located out of Boston. They were a young company, had tons of customers in the restaurant industry. They handled a lot of the back office work of those restaurants. COVID hit, restaurants shut down, the whole country shut down. The number of people that they laid off here in the Boston area was, if I remember correctly, close to 90% of their staff. They're just, nobody was paying the bills. Nobody was having anybody come to restaurants anymore. But to rebuild their workforce, once their business started to pick up gradually, they looked to their former employees to rebuild that workforce. And that's an exceptionally positive way that builds employer brand for now and into the future. So from my perspective, looking at the people who used to work for you, who may want to come back, is a fantastic talent rediscovery option, in my opinion.
I'll add to that, Tom, just again, thinking about that from a referrals perspective too. If they've landed somewhere else, if they've moved on to another role, if they still had a good experience while they were employed at your company, they probably have a network of talent that's going to be valuable to you. Don't forsake or forget about engaging those folks as alumni of your company to be able to tap into their networks and refer talent back. To Tom's point, they work there, they know what it takes to be successful there. They probably have a pretty good idea from their own network who could be. Why not incent and engage those folks? And I think we're going to see a lot of that happening over the coming months as the world opens up again.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Bob. That's all the questions that we had from the audience today. I'll turn it back over to you, Bob.
All right. Well, listen, thank you all to the Aliro team. Thank you all for your time and effort to put this together today. Tom, thank you very much for carving out time from your busy schedule to contribute. Really appreciate it. And to all the participants on the call today, I hope there was a certain amount of knowledge and thinking that will you'll be able to take away from the call today. And for anybody that's interested in learning more about us, we'd be happy to engage and set up a call. Thank you again for the time today. Everybody have a safe week.